Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for agreeing to chat with me today. I'm very grateful for that. So, may I start by asking you to tell us your name and share with us anything that you feel comfortable sharing that will help us get to know you a little bit better?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Tymeka Whiteside. I am a program manager with Worldwide Services and Support with a global tech company. I'm also a podcasting life coach based here in the North Carolina area in the Triangle. I'm a mom. I'm excited because my daughter is in the military and she's actually home with me now. She's been away for 9 months, so it's been a very long time, and she's going to be leaving again. So I'm excited about that. Um, just a person that's always on the go, just trying to develop and build in the community. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Do a lot of outreach type things, and yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your podcasting? What do you podcast about, and what is the area that you aim for?
Sure. So the name of my podcast is Candid Conversation Time, Tyme, just a play on my own name.
Absolutely.
And what it is, it's a podcast. Number one, the purpose is and mission is to give voice to those who don't really feel that they have a voice. But it really is bringing to the forefront conversations that people aren't necessarily comfortable talking about out in the open. So some of the topic areas that have been recorded and are available right now through all podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, all of those, are conversations like parents without children and how things are viewed if you don't physically have children, any biological children, and what that feels like. Fathers who or couples who go through the loss, whether it's miscarriage, how people tend to flock to the mom, but that dad is hurting too, and not really addressing the emotional side and those types of things. I just recently, over this past weekend, published one entitled Masked Authenticity. So the idea that when we are in certain environments, we have to mask who we are authentically, particularly in the workplace. I talk about code switching, those types of topics that aren't those things that, you can talk about in certain arenas, but not bringing them to the forefront. So that's kind of what it is. It literally is candid conversations. It is saying, okay, we're not really willing to just come to the forefront and address these things. So I'm trying to give voice to some of those areas.
Well, thank you very much for that. Please remind me that we're going to talk about this offline because I do have some questions about that, but we can talk about that offline.
Sure.
So let me ask you about your day job. So you said you work for a global company. What do you do?
So I'm a program manager, a part of our worldwide services and support. So that group is the group that is going to oversee things such as our technical support teams, our escalation support teams. It's overlooking our professional services group. So what I am responsible for is working on some of the communication, working on the reporting, how things roll up, how things are being reported into our SVP that can go into the whole vision for the fiscal year for the company at large.
Excellent. And how long have you been doing that? Has you been in a role like that for a long time, or is this a new career? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I've been with this company for 7.5 years after being with another company. And of course, with reorganizations, we hear that all the time. I ended up, which worked out in perfect timing because I was actually finishing my second master's degree, was trying to figure out how do I actually do an internship and work and things like that. So it actually worked out with perfect timing. So I ended up with a friend actually hearing me say, I'm sick of being in the house. So she had turned in my resume, and I actually started there as a part-time employee. But over time, getting there, because I have a very diverse background as it relates to tech, but realizing that my educational background, my education, and my work background can still tie into the tech industry. So the particular role that I'm in now, literally today, I consider myself 2 weeks old. But prior to this actual role, I was still working in the company. I was a content specialist, still doing the same program management type work, but just in a different space. And as you know, technology is evolving and it's forever evolving. So we're moving more into cloud services and those types of arenas. So moving from storage to where we are now and the continuous growth. So in my role, I'm having opportunities to interface with so many different people, not just, and I consider the program management my day job, but I'm also the global lead, one of the co-leads for the Blacks in Tech. So even from that perspective, with that affinity group, the interaction across the globe with interacting with people of color in the tech industry.
Okay. Can you tell me what is it like to be a Black woman in your company, in tech, and in your life? What is it like to be a Black woman?
To be a Black woman in tech is challenging. To be a Black woman in today's society is challenging. It's all in how it's the navigation process. So let me speak to the tech part of it. So obviously I am somewhat of a unicorn, if you will, because you already have the tech industry inundated by white men.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you start to factor in the number of women, smaller population, and then when you whittle that down to Black women, even smaller population. So there are the good things, but then there are also those challenges. So I use, for example, one of the challenges that I recently talked about is kind of having that low standard expectation in that environment. And so to see me move and have conversations with different levels of leaders, even all the way up to my CEO, people are looking like, well, how did that happen? I shared a story where when we were still in the office, I had done a talk that was global. And I had someone come up to me in the break room to say, wow, I really enjoyed you today. And quite naturally, my response was, oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But then she responded and said, no, really, you spoke very well. As opposed to what? No, I was just surprised. I've never heard you speak before. Okay. And of course I'm thinking, okay, let me hurry up and exit.
Right.
But there was that follow-up. And I heard something about you the other day. Okay, really? Yeah, I heard you have 2 master's degrees. Yes. Where are we going with this? Well, I didn't know that. And of course, at that point I was irritated. And said, well, you've never asked me what my background is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you just kind of assumed that I was just some random number of Black woman that they hired. You've never asked me what my background is. So you have those types of scenarios. Having the scenario of, if I feel very strongly about a subject matter or something that we're talking about, then getting the label of being aggressive versus literally my counterpart of any other persuasion, they get labeled as passionate. Well, why can't I be passionate? So that's one of the challenges that I face in tech. As far as being a Black woman, I think it also goes across whatever space. And that is, again, being a unicorn, the assumptions. So people not understanding that I grew up in a 2-parent Christian home versus the assumption, especially being from the South, assuming that I grew up in a 1-parent home. And that's not my story. Feeling like there's a possibility that I grew up impoverished. And I'm not saying that we were the richest people, but my parents worked very hard to make sure that they provided a good life for my brother and myself. And so growing up in a home, actually in a house, I'm never worrying about food and shelter and those types of things. So I don't have this horrible story that people would assume has happened. I have educated parents. They're both retired now, but they were professionals in their work world. So even telling those stories, people are kind of like, is this really real?
Right.
And I'm to the point that I don't feel like I have to spend a lot of time explaining or justifying who I am and where I've come from.
and all of what you said has been told by many, 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 many Black and brown women. We tell that story often, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not paid equitably. We're always assumed to be intellectually challenged and unqualified for the job that we're in. And we're there because of some quota or something that the company had to do to make themselves feel better about themselves. I want to
Right.
ask you about something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is diversity, equality, and inclusion. So we hear DEI all the time, and we see lots of companies hiring DEI officers. You said in your company you have a group that kind of addresses issues with Black and brown communities or underrepresented communities. But is that something that actually produces results? In other words, in your space, and I'm not asking you specifically about your company or your work, but I'm asking you in your space, in your understanding of this, do you see when companies create these diversity officers or these groups to talk about diversity, do you see results from that? Do you see them putting money into that? Do you see them hiring more diverse candidates? Do you see, something that you can say, well, we've got this group and we've got this diversity officer, but are we actually seeing results? And I want to be 100% clear. I'm not talking about your company. I'm not talking about your work. I'm talking about just in general.
Thank you. So holistically speaking, I think for some time, there start to be an evolution where companies started hiring diversity officers as a thing to do, as this is the right thing to do. This is a good look for us from a business practice perspective. Holistically, though, I don't think companies actually started to fully understand, invest, and engage to the magnitude that they are now until George Floyd.
Right.
So it is still very early on to actually see what those metrics look like as a result thereof. I think conversations have started, but time is yet to tell. I don't believe if we were to literally look at the companies who have come forth and made public statements and things like that, I believe if we were to look at the metrics right now, I don't think we would see anything differently now than what we would have seen last year. And in some instances, I honestly, and this is just one person's opinion, not looking at any numbers, I believe if we really were to look at it right now, a lot of companies are starting to feel the pressures of attrition of that underrepresented group as a result of, because there is that feeling of a lot of reaction versus being proactive. So I honestly, in being candid, nope, I don't think at all there's a big change. Now, in fairness, I think because things had just been a go through the motion type scenario, I believe companies have to be reactive. So what I'm looking for over time is to see that companies are actually putting the dollars where their mouth has been, and that they're starting to put programs into place, and that they are actually tracking the movement. They're being intentional on opening pipelines and having engagement in diverse communities, and they're actually providing the training necessary for advancement for people in the Black and brown community. At what point they find stability and consistency there, at that point, there needs to be a pivot. That pivot then should push companies into a space where they're now being proactive. Because I've used this scenario. People who've never had a house fire, they may not have ever seen a need for smoke detectors, fire alarms, fire extinguishers, those types of things. They've never seen a need for it. But as soon as they have a house fire, once they go through the rebuilding process, then you can guarantee they're trying to find flame retardant clothes and blankets and all of that, because now they've had an experience that will change the way they think and they see and view things.
Excellent. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit. As you said, you're a mom. You have
Yes.
a daughter. What are your concerns or fears or thoughts about your daughter?
Oh my goodness. So I just went through this, and I go through this regularly because she was deployed, being in the military, when everything was going on, when things really got in the hype of things with George Floyd. One of my biggest concerns was when she returned to the US, that she was not going to receive the same level of respect as her comrades that have been doing the exact same work that she's been doing. And that has been my continuous concern for her. I do some of the work that I do with my company in the community and things like that, because to be quite honest with you, I believe that my work is going to be an impact for future generations. I really have to question whether I will see the huge impact in my lifetime. But if the work that I do now will make a difference for her, for my nephew is a chiropractor. He's a Black man. I worry about him. Um, Whenever I do have grandchildren, I have young godchildren, I want to make sure that this work that I'm doing will bring a change for them so that they don't experience some of the things that I experience. I'm doing the work because of what my parents experienced, what my grandparents experienced, so on and so forth. So as a mom, as an auntie, as a godmother, I am very concerned about what I see, because I know that as society has changed, as technology has changed, as the biases are just, and racism, let's just call it what it is so far in the forefront. I want to make sure that they are as well equipped as possible without losing their identity in the midst of it.
Yeah. I think the military has done a better job, but if you look at this historically, you go back to the Civil War, you had Black men pick up arms and fight with the Union. And when that was over, they were back to being undesirables, for lack of a better word.
Exactly.
In World War One and World War Two, you have Black men. I don't know about men and women, but they had Black men go over there and fight, and then they come back to a country where they were again undesirable. They couldn't take advantage of GI benefits. They couldn't get housing. All of these things. For your daughter, I'm assuming those things don't exist anymore. But then, can she, when she transitions out of the military, if she ever does, will she get a job that is representative of what she's done over her military career? Because what we find, you always see when you look at job positions, they always ask, "Are you a veteran?" And they ask that question. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem about where that is then the veteran man versus the veteran woman. And then you further extrapolate that to the veteran Black or brown person. So, it's a very interesting thing. And I would love to hear more about that from you at another chat about, how she sees that, maybe even have the two of you chat with me together to talk a little bit about the military and her future and, what that means. We have about
Absolutely.
7 minutes. So I am going to
Okay.
leave the rest of this time to talk to you, to raise any issues that you have, or to highlight things that we did not discuss.
Sure. So, and thank you again so much for having this conversation. I think it is so important that diversity becomes pretty much a daily conversation in the Black and Brown community, because as we are continuing to raise young Black and Brown children, we have to get them into the cycle and the norms of understanding what this really means. Because what I have seen is that in society, when we start to talk about diversity, people get uncomfortable with the whole diversity conversation about Black and Brown. We want to just start to go into conversations, whether diversity, like in my industry in STEM, with women. Oh, okay, we're diverse. We've got women. No, we have to dig deeper into that. So for me, it is super important that we start to have these conversations. For myself, I am really working towards how do I partner with people in the community so that we start to get more education. And I realize not everyone is going to have a formal education, but developing education in the community to start talking about things that have kind of been lost over the years, talking about budgets. How do we develop? How do we become empowered? How are we building our networks? Are we staying within our simple silos of our communities but how do we make our communities more advanced? How do we go back to having our own Black Wall Street, educating people on the importance of how powerful our Black dollars are, how our brown dollars are? How do we keep that in our communities so that we can start to build wealth for the future? So for me, it is absolutely critical that we have these conversations. It is critical to go into these communities for myself. I have to say, I thank God that I did not have to live the tough life that I have friends that have had to live. And so for me, it's important to let, prior to schools closing, I was volunteering going into an underrepresented school in Durham. So these Black and brown kids can see, yeah, they're really people that look like them. They can actually touch me. They don't have to see me on a screen to kind of idolize. We can have these conversations. I can talk to these children. So for me, it is important. And I'm not just talking about children. I'm talking about our older adults that haven't had exposure, that may be raising their grandchildren. I want to do a level of education with them on technology so they'll understand what these kids are doing with these iPads and laptops and things like that. When they are out and about and they're shopping, I don't want them to be taken advantage of because they don't know how to necessarily navigate the technological systems that stores have adapted. So those are just some things that are top of mind, important for me. It really is. I am trying to expand my network now, pulling in people that have backgrounds that we can partner together and say, how do we change the narrative of our community again?
Add me to your network.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And do you have some time to talk later today, 2 or 3 o'clock, for just about 30 minutes or so? What's your schedule like today? If not, one day this week?
I am looking, and I am open from 2:30 to 3:30 this afternoon.
I don't know if I have your cell phone number, but I'll email you and
Okay.
we can talk. But I do have a couple of things I want to ask, and that's not appropriate here. So
Okay.
when this video converts, I will send you a link. Please review it.
Okay.
If it looks fine to you, please let me know if I may upload it. If not, we can do it over or whatever you think necessary. And again,
Okay.
I like to do this again. I would love to hear your daughter's take on what one of my earlier chats, probably 3 or 4 months ago, was with a woman who was in the military. She has since left, and her story was, I mean, she's talked about the benefits of being in the military and all that, and how great that was. But being a woman in the military, a Black woman in the military, that there were times where she felt like she was ostracized or felt
Mhm.
like she didn't belong, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I understand that to a degree. My daughter looks super, super young, but she's an officer, and she started in a very male dominated area.
Uh,
And so I get it.
yeah.
And so we'll talk this afternoon. She's only here with me a few more days, so we can make it happen. And I'll talk to her when she's out for a run, of course. Um, but I'll definitely talk to her. And then when we chat this afternoon, we can try to get something scheduled before she leaves North Carolina again.
Thank you so much, Tymeka. You
Absolutely.
are phenomenal. I am glad that there are women like you in the world. And as I said, add me a part of your network. And I have some other work I need you to help me do. So I'll send you an email as soon as I get a break. I'm in meetings until 1:30. I'm like, oh my God. But anyway, I will send you an email as soon as I can, and try to get us together for today at 2:30, because I really do need some help. So I appreciate this very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Stay safe, and talk with you soon.
You too. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.